Hello, welcome to our second Book 6, Unit 1 vocabulary video. And in this video, we are going to practice using some of the vocabulary we introduced in the first video. So let's remind ourselves of some of the vocabulary. So this is important for reading 1, or this is the vocabulary important for reading 1. And while I'm not going to go too much into the meanings at this point, because we should already know them, we are going to review pronunciation very quickly. So number 1, a benefit. A benefit. Number 2, a savant. A savant. Number 3, an image. An image. Number 4, anxious. Anxious. Number 5, astonishing. Astonishing. Number 6, compensate. Compensate. Number 7, disabled. Disabled. Number 8, estimate. Estimate. Number 9, flexible. Flexible. Number 10, interaction. Interaction. Number 11, predictable. Predictable. And number 12, retain. Retain. Okay, very good. Now that you've heard the pronunciation one more time, make sure that you pause the video and maybe replay that part until you get your own pronunciation correct. Pay particular attention to this little one, retain. Make sure that you are stressing the tain, okay? So retain. Okay, good. Now that we've gone over the pronunciation of these 12 words, we're going to look at how they might be used in context. And we're also going to look at the different parts of speech. So how some of these words can be changed into nouns or adjectives or even verbs, and how we would use them in paragraphs and gap fills. So let's press ahead. So what we're going to do now is we're going to complete the gaps using the correct form of the vocabulary word. And we're going to have to think of what part of speech is it. So there are 4 main parts of speech. By now we should all know what they are. They are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. So we're going to have to consider this when coming up with our own answers. So let's have a look and see how this is done. Well, here we've got a word given to us, a savant, and then we've got a gap fill. So we're going to read what this says. So something usually has extraordinary skills in one of 5 major areas: art, memory, mathematics, musical abilities, or map-making skills. Whatever the skill, it is always linked to massive memory. Daniel Tammet has been called a human calculator and has extraordinary mathematical skills. So what we have to do in this section is we have to look at this word, a savant, and think whether we can put this word savant here as a noun, or if we should use a verb, an adjective, or an adverb. Now at this point, hopefully you realize that savant cannot be used as a verb and it cannot be used as an adjective. So the correct answer here would be to keep the word form the same. So we'd want to put the noun of savant, which is, of course, savant, and then we'd have the correct answer. So the correct answer here is a savant usually has extraordinary skills in one of five major areas: art, memory, mathematics, musical abilities, or map making skills. Okay, let's press ahead and see if you can do this exercise on your own. Now, before you begin, remind yourself what you need to do. Here, let's say, is the base word, disabled. It's being introduced to us as an adjective. In this gap fill, you have two gaps, number 1 and number 2. You're going to be using this word disabled to help you in your answer. But you're going to have to decide whether you are going to need the noun form of disabled, the verb form of disabled, or the adjective form of disabled in your answers. So a good thing to do here is look at your gaps, try and decide what type of word would go in here, whether it would be a noun, a verb, or an adjective. And once you do that, think of the noun form of disabled or the adjective form of disabled. The adjective is quite easy for us because it's already given here. When you've done that, also look for context clues in the sentences, which will help you even further. Then write in your correct answer. Pause the video and try and do that now. Good. Hopefully you came up with the two answers. Let's go through this together. So a savant often has a significant mental disability, such as autism or even a severe brain injury. Notice in number 1, the correct answer was disability. That is a noun. That's the noun form of disabled. And the reason that works is here we have the typical adjective noun construction. So by looking at this word mental, which was operating as an adjective, you should have known it would be followed by a noun. And the noun word that we were looking for was disability. That's the noun form of disabled. Let's keep reading. Some of them can't even do simple everyday tasks, such as tie their shoes, but despite being something, they have absolutely remarkable skills in some specific area. The something here is disabled. Despite being disabled, they have absolutely remarkable skills in some specific area. The correct answer was the adjective disabled. Let's move ahead and see if you can do this with another word. Here we have the word anxious. Again, we have two gaps. So we are going to have to decide what part of speech to use for anxious. Whether we will decide to put the adjective in or maybe a noun. Is there a verb of anxious? No, there isn't. Is there an adverb of anxious? Yes, there is. So keeping in mind that there is a noun form of anxious, an adjective form of anxious, and an adverb form of anxious, try and decide which one will be used here in these two gap fills. Look at the words around the spaces to help you come up with the correct word form. When you do that, try and think of the different parts of speech of anxious. So what is the noun form of anxious? Once you've done that, pause the video and see if you can fill in the correct answers. Good. Let's go through the answers together. So, many autistic savants get anxious in social situations. So here the correct form was anxious, keeping it as an adjective. That was correct. In something results in many children with ASD being unable to make friends, and therefore they often become socially isolated. Therefore is spelled incorrectly. The correct word here, in fact, their anxiety results in many children with ASD being unable to make friends. So what we were looking for here was the noun form of anxious. Was there any clue to help us there? Well, yeah, there were. For one, this is a pronoun, which is showing a possessive. So a possession of anxious. And this is the subject of the sentence being followed by the verb results. Okay, followed by the verb results. And we know in the subject of a sentence, we are going to have a noun somewhere. Okay, a noun. So anxious would need to be changed to a noun, and that would be anxiety. Before we move on, let's ask ourselves some of these questions. Do you sometimes get anxious? And if you do, what about? Okay, good. Hopefully you came up with something that might be a little bit scary or intimidating. So sometimes we get anxious before we take a test or give a speech, okay? Because we find it to be a little bit scary. Our second question is being anxious an exciting or an uncomfortable feeling? An exciting or uncomfortable feeling. Now, this is a bit of a trick question. Being anxious is usually considered an uncomfortable feeling, but sometimes it can be exciting. And this is why when we say the definition of anxious, or describe the definition of anxious, we don't just say being nervous. We say being nervous or eager. That eagerness sometimes creates excitement. And that's why being anxious can sometimes be positive. Let's talk about that a bit more. Well, here we've got anxious being used as the adjective. And here we've kind of got it used in a positive sense. So we've got a sentence. The boy was anxious to open his birthday present to see what is inside. So here we've got a picture of the boy. And as you can see, he is anxious to open his birthday present to see what is inside. Now look at this boy. Does he look excited? Yeah, he does. So, do we think he is showing a positive or a negative feeling? Yeah, he's showing a positive feeling. And think about it. Have you ever been eager to open a gift? Something you really want to do. Kind of excited to see what's inside. Well, you probably have been. If you're kind of eager to open a gift and you're excited to see what's inside, you can say you're anxious to open the gift. That's using anxious in a positive way. So remember, even though being anxious is often negative and we connect it with being nervous, it can also be a positive feeling. It could be connected to being eager and being excited before something happens. Okay, let's move on to this next word. So we're going to be using a benefit. Again, we've been given the noun. We're going to have to think about whether it has an adjective form, whether it has a verb form. Try and think of what those words might be. Then read the paragraph. Look for the gaps and decide what type of word you need. A noun, a verb, an adjective. Then simply put in the correct form of benefit, either the noun form, the verb form, or the adjective form. We've done this 3 times already, so you should feel familiar with it. One piece of advice I would like to give is when you're using nouns, make sure that you're using the correct plural noun. So there is a difference between singular and plural. If it's going to be singular, it will often be followed by a, sometimes the, but the can be plural as well. It's a bit trickier, that one. Okay, now that you've done, or we've talked about what you should be doing, pause the video and see if you can write in the correct word form of benefit in these 2 gaps. Okay, let's press on. There are not only disadvantages to ASD, one of the benefits with an S of autism is detail orientation. For example, the British autistic savant Stephen Wiltshire is able to draw detailed cityscapes from memory. This trait could be very beneficial in jobs such as accounting and architecture, where a lot of attention to detail is required. Okay, so let's move up here to number 1. We said the correct answer was benefits. So we're looking for the noun form, which is benefit, but we're going to add a plural to it. It's going to be benefits. Why a plural? Well, there was a clue. It said one of the. Well, if we're going to say one of the something, then we know there is more than one. We're only taking one out of something, then we know there's more than one. And that was the clue of why this should be a plural noun. So it should be benefits. And that works for all the nouns. So you'd have one of the apples, let's say. So anytime you see this one of the in front of where a noun should be, you know that's going to be a plural noun. Let's move on to number two. Well, number two was beneficial. Beneficial. And this is just following our noun, be verb, adjective construction, although it's quite uh, made more complex by having the modal verb. The modal verb could in front of be. But this is still our noun, be verb, adjective construction. Okay, so the correct answer here was beneficial, which is the adjective form of benefit. Does anyone know what the opposite of a benefit is? Think about that. What is the opposite of a benefit? Well, if a benefit is something that gives us an advantage, then the opposite of a benefit is a disadvantage. Okay, let's press ahead. Okay, so this time our word is compensate or compensate for. We're using or we're being introduced to it as the verb form. Okay, the verb form. And here, again, we're going to be needing to put in the correct form of the word, the correct form of the word, or the correct part of speech in these two gap fills. Okay, so what you should be doing here, again, you should be thinking about the different types of ways this word can be used. And as we've already talked about the different things you can do with nouns and adjectives, um, let's consider the different ways you can use verbs. So remember, we have to follow the grammatical structure. So we might need to change the tense of the verb depending on how it's used in the sentence. Okay? You might also need to consider what word would go best here, an adjective, verb, or a noun. So these are all things you need to consider in these gap fills. Not only if it's an adjective, verb, or noun, but whether it's a noun or whether we will be using the verb in a different tense, such as the continuous or even in the third person singular. Present. So that would be adding an S on the end of a regular verb. So now that you have all of this in your mind and are kind of primed to think like that, do what we were doing before. Think about the different word forms for compensate. Then read the paragraph. Decide whether you will be using a noun, an adjective, or a verb in each of these gap fills. And if it's a noun, think about what type of noun it might be. If it's a verb, think about its tense and how its correct word form would be used. Okay, pause the video and try and do that. Okay, so let's go over this. So, brain injury compensation can result in new and unique talent suddenly developing. After a traumatic brain injury, Derek Amado awoke from a coma, suddenly being able to play the piano like a concert pianist. His brain compensated for the injury by developing a new ways of thinking and processing information. So let's go up to number one. The correct answer here was compensation. We were using the noun. And again, this is just realizing that our noun should be coming on the end of our subject before our verb construction. So brain injury compensation. Number two, his brain compensated for the injury by developing new ways of thinking and processing information. Why compensated for? Well, hopefully you realize that this was in the past, okay? Notice that Derek Amado awoke from a coma, okay? Suddenly being able to play the piano like a concert pianist. So this was something that he did in the past, okay? And it's showing that his brain compensated for the injury by developing new ways of thinking and processing information. Again, this verb is following that past structure, okay? That past structure. Hopefully, also you realize that it was going to be the verb form here because, or the verb part of speech. The key being it came after the subject, and there was also a little clue with the for. The for. The for will often come after the word in the verb form. Okay, before we move on, let's consider what the words down in that orange box. And think about this and try and answer this question. Do we compensate for a weakness or a strength? Do we compensate for a weakness or a strength? Good. We compensate for a weakness. We don't compensate for a strength. We compensate for a weakness. Okay. So by now you should know what to do because we've gone over this quite a few times. So I'm going to leave you here with the verb estimate. Estimate. You're going to have to think of the different forms of this word, like the noun and the adjective, or potentially the adverb. Then you're going to be deciding, once you read this, what type of word goes in the gap fill. So whether it will be the adjective, verb, or noun. And then you are going to put in the correct form of that word. So pause the video and see if you can do that. Okay, so let's read the paragraph. So scientists aren't sure about how many people have savant syndrome. All they know is that it is a rare condition. One estimate is that about 1 in 1 million people have it. The estimated number of cases of female savants is even lower. So let's move back here to number one. So notice that I said one estimate. One estimate is that about 1 in 1 million people have it. So by saying estimate and not estimate, what I'm signaling there is that I'm using the noun. It's still spelt the same way, it's just pronounced a little bit differently. So here we should have one estimate. And again, the key is it's coming before the be verb, so it's the subject, one estimate. Number two, the estimated number of cases of female savants is even lower. So here we're going to have estimated. That's not being used as a simple past verb, it's being used as an adjective. Okay? It's an adjective describing basically the number, or the number of cases. The number of cases. And it's describing this noun. Okay? So here we should have the estimated, that's with the D ending on estimate. Number of cases of female savants is even lower. So number one, it was the noun, estimate, and number two, it was estimated. So before we move on, let's consider this. Are estimates always correct or always accurate? Are estimates always correct or are they always accurate? Basically the same thing. Are estimates always correct? And the correct answer here would be no. We should remember this from what we covered in video 1. But to estimate, or when we make an estimate, it's a guess. It's an educated guess, but it's still a guess. Okay, so they are not always accurate. Or in other words, they're not always correct. If you're having trouble with the meanings of these words at this point, please review what we covered in video 1 and make sure that you understand the meanings of the words, because if you don't understand the meanings of the words at this stage, you will find it very difficult. Okay, here we have the word flexible, and it's being introduced to us as an adjective. So again, think about whether this word has the noun form, whether it has a verb form, what types of what parts of speech does flexible have, and then when you do that, read the paragraph, decide what type of word will go here, a noun, a verb, or an adjective. Do the same with number 2, and then put in the correct form of the word flexible in your answer. Okay, pause the video and see if you can do that. Okay, let's go through the paragraph, and I'm going to say the correct words. So flexible, adjective, thinkers are able to adapt to a situation and change their way of thinking. For example, they can come up with different solutions to a problem. However, people with ASD often lack flexibility in their thinking and can get really upset over any kind of change. So number 1 here was using the adjective form, flexible thinkers, and the adjective was describing the thinkers, flexible thinkers. So thinkers that are able to change and adapt their what they're thinking about or their points of view. Over at number two, however, people with ASD often lack flexibility, flexibility in their thinking and can get really upset over any kind of change. So what we were looking here, or what we were looking for here in this space is the noun form of flexible, which is flexibility. Flexibility. So before we move on, let's just consider this question over here. People who are rigid or flexible in their thinking find it difficult to change jobs. So what it wants you to do here is decide which word is correct. People who are rigid in their thinking find it difficult to change jobs, or people who are flexible in their thinking find it difficult to change jobs. Choose the correct word to make a sentence that makes sense. Yeah, the correct answer here was rigid. So people who are rigid in their thinking find it difficult to change jobs. So if you're rigid in your thinking, it means that you find it difficult to adapt to things, that you struggle with any change, and that you like to do things kind of in the same way. If you're flexible, it means you are able to adapt to change. So here, if, if you're flexible, it wouldn't make sense that you would find it difficult to change jobs. That wouldn't make sense because why would you find it difficult to change jobs if you're able to change and adapt to situations? So flexible would be the wrong answer here, and the correct answer would be rigid. Let's talk about this word. So we remember that an image is something. I can't explain what it is because there's a question about it down here. So try and remember what an image is. So we're going to use it in context. This image contains almost 400 birds. It's the work of a 10-year-old boy with autism. He even knows the names and the Latin names of all of them. Quite incredible. So even though that's an amazing fact, we're really focusing here on image, okay? And let's think about what is the closest synonym for image. Remember, a synonym is a similar word or a word with a similar meaning. So what is the closest synonym for image? Is it an artwork? Is it a picture? Or is it a painting? Good. Hopefully you got that correct. An image is a picture. It's a picture. Okay? An image is a picture. So the closest synonym for image is number two, picture. Okay, let's go back to doing what we were doing a while ago, but now we're going to use the word interaction. Now, interaction is being introduced to us here as a noun, but it may have a verb or an adjective or even an adverb form. I want you to think about that. I'm not going to say what it is until I'm giving the answers. So think about what different word forms this has, the different parts of speech that are used for interaction. When you think about that and kind of have them in mind, read this paragraph and then decide what word would best fit in the space, an adjective, verb, or noun. Then write in the correct form of the word interaction in the space. When you've done that, try and answer these true or false questions. So there's 3 questions down there. Interaction can be done alone, interaction requires communication, and social interaction only happens between humans. Try and answer those questions. So whether they are true or whether they are false. Pause the video and do those exercises now. Okay, so number 1, having human interaction is an important part of our lives. However, people on the autism spectrum sometimes find it difficult to interact with others in social situations. Okay, so very quickly, number 1 here was interaction. Hopefully you recognize that a noun would go here. Again, we're kind of using it as the end of the subject before our main verb in the sentence. Okay. Moving on to number 2. The form of the word we were looking for was the verb. So find it difficult to interact with others in social situations. And hopefully you recognize this little to, okay? And you knew it was going to be the base form because it is the infinitive. Good, the infinitive. So find it difficult to interact with others in social situations. Let's move on to our true or false questions. So interaction can be done alone. Is that true or false? The correct answer there would be false. Interaction always involves other people. It's a form of communication or collaboration. And to communicate and collaborate, you need more than one person. Number 2, interaction requires communication. So interaction needs communication. The correct answer there would be true. You need to be able to communicate to be able to interact with someone. And we can interact and communicate in lots of different ways. Some of us communicate and have an interaction online, and others do it face to face. But it's still, all interaction requires communication of some kind. Number 3, social interaction only happens between humans. Social interaction only happens between humans. Did you write true or false? A lot of people would say true here, that social interaction only happens between humans. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with them because humans interact quite a bit. We communicate and talk to each other. However, it is possible that you could consider some form of social interaction between animals, let's say, if you feel that they are communicating with each other. And some scientists believe that they do communicate with each other. So I'm not going to talk too much about that, but I'm just going to say the answer here, most people will go true, but there's an argument to be made for choosing false. Okay, so for number 3, social interaction only happens between humans. I would say, personally, if I was asked to answer this, I would put down either T or F, and I would just write usually. Usually it does, yes. Usually true, maybe. Okay. Let's move ahead to the next word. Predictable. Predictable. Again, we're going to be having to think about the noun form of this word, the verb form of this word, maybe the different tenses it can be used in, whether it's a plural noun. These are all things we need to think of when filling in these gaps. So you should know how to do this at this stage. We've covered it quite a bit. So I'm just going to ask you to pause the video and fill in the correct word form. Okay, now that you've done that, let's read on. So, Temple Grandin is a famous animal welfare specialist and autism activist. Animal behavior is famously unpredictable, but Temple's unique brain enabled her to see predictable patterns in the way animals move. Her predictions have been used in designing several humane handling facilities for cattle. So, number one, um, Temple's unique brain enabled her to see predictable patterns. And here we're using the adjective form as it's up here to describe this word patterns. So, adjective, noun, adjective, noun. So, the correct word here was predictable. Here, number two, the correct answer was her predictions. Her predictions have been used in designing several humane handling facilities for cattle. So, why predictions with an S? Well, the first thing we need to realize is that what's going to go here is a noun. A noun. Okay, so this would be following our subject with a noun on the end before our verb. Okay, so happy, happy. So this is our verb construction here, and we're going to have our noun before our verb construction. Remember, it's subject noun, and we'll often, or sorry, subject verb, and we'll often have our noun at the end of the subject construction, usually. In fact, most of the time. And here we have predictions, which is the plural of prediction. And we know it's going to be a plural. Does anyone know why? Well, hopefully you notice this little word have. Okay, have. So when it's if it was her prediction, it would have been has been, has been. But when it's her predictions, it will be have been. So because this word is have and not has, we know this word is going to be the plural noun. So predictions, predictions. Okay, before we move on from this, let's think about the word prediction. There are some questions down here. So, are predictions made about the past or the future? So, are predictions made about the past or the future? Think about that. Yeah, predictions are usually about something that's going to be in the future. In fact, they're always about something that's going to be in the future. We try and predict the future. The past has already happened, so we can't really predict something that's already happened. Um, are they always accurate? Or in other words, are they always correct? No, they aren't always correct. We often get our predictions wrong. And finally, what is the opposite of predictable? What is the opposite of predictable? Well, the opposite of predictable is unpredictable. Unpredictable. Okay, let's move on to the next word. So the next word here is astonishing. Astonishing. And again, you know what to do. You're going to be looking at the different word forms of this word, thinking about whether it's going to be an adjective form of astonishing or a noun form of astonishing being used here. If it's a verb, what type of verb? Is it going to be the present simple? Is it going to be the simple past? These are all things to keep in mind. All right, now that you've done that, pause the video and see if you can fill in the correct word. Okay, now that you've done that, let's read on. So, Kim Peek had been called a mega savant. He had many astonishing skills. Astonishing here being the adjective. So, describing these skills. Okay, skills being the noun. So, he had many astonishing skills. For example, before Google Maps could do it, Kim could provide instant driving directions between any two cities in the world. However, scientists were most astonished by his ability to read 2 pages of a book at the same time, one with his left eye and the other with his right. Okay, so the correct word here were is astonished. Astonished. So however, the scientists were astonished. That's with an ed ending by his ability to read 2 pages of a book at the same time, one with his left eye and the other with his right. Okay, now that we've done that, let's look at this question in the or this exercise in the orange box. So scientists were surprised by Kim Peek's ability to read 2 pages at once, or scientists were not surprised by Kim Peek's ability to read 2 pages at once. Which do you think is the correct word to use? Okay, so hopefully you recognize that scientists were surprised by Kim Peek's ability to read 2 pages at once. How do we know this? Well, because they were astonished. Remember, if you're astonished, you're very surprised or amazed by something. Okay, let's look at the next word. So, retain, the word retain. Again, think about how this word could be used. It's different forms of the word, so it's noun, it's adjective, and try and put the correct form of the word in the gaps. So 1 and 2. Pause the video and try and do that now. Okay, let's go through the answers. So many savants do not only retain, do not only retain their astonishing abilities. So before we move on, we were using retain, which is the verb construction. Okay, the verb construction. And here we should have recognized that it's the negative uh, form because it's got don't spread out as do not, and the base form. So the base form is retain. So do not retain. The word only could be ignored there. You All you had to do was look at that do not, and you should have known it should have been the verb and the base verb retain. So many savants do not only retain their astonishing abilities, but they actually improve them over time. Nadia Chamim, a child with autism and severe learning disabilities, had been able to draw realistic horsemen and horses from age 3, but when she started learning to speak, she didn't retain her drawing ability. Scientists are unsure why there was no retention of skills in her case. So, why there was no retention of skills in her case. So, the word we were looking for here is the noun, and the noun form of retain is retention. Retention. So, the retention of skills in her case. Let's move on to this question. So, true or false? After she learned to speak, Nadia lost her ability to draw horses. Based on what we read, do we think that's true or false? Yep, the correct answer here is true. So, after she learned to speak, Nadia lost her ability to draw horses. How do we know that? Well, she wasn't able to retain her drawing ability. So once she learned how to speak, she wasn't able to retain her drawing ability. Remember, if we retain something, we remember or keep it. When we don't retain something, we lose it or forget it. Or lose that ability. Okay, so because she wasn't able to retain her drawing ability, it means she lost her ability, in this case, to draw horses. Okay, excellent. Okay, let's do something a little bit different because even I was getting tired of them. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is here choosing the correct option. So we're going to be working on this exercise. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to pause the video and try and end these sentences after each word by choosing the correct option. So working through the first one together, we can see the word is a benefit. And a benefit is one, positive, or two, negative. So a benefit is a positive effect or a negative effect. What you're going to be doing is choosing the correct word. So you have to think about what the word benefit means, and then decide whether it is a positive effect or a negative effect. Okay, and hopefully you realize that a benefit is a positive effect. So the answer here was number one, positive effect. And remember, a benefit is something that's advantageous, so that's a positive thing. It gives us an advantage. Okay, now that we've practiced doing that one, um, let's see if we can do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on our own. So what you're going to need to do here is pause the video and choose the correct option for each of the sentences following these words. Okay, so pause the video and try and do that now. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to finish those exercises. So moving on to number 2, anxious. So feeling anxious is usually a good feeling or a bad feeling. The correct answer here is number 2. It is usually a bad feeling. Now, on rare occasions, it can be good, but the key here was usually. Usually. And it's usually a bad feeling. Number 3, astonishing. An astonishing skill is being able to do something, number 1, normal, or number 2, amazing. And the correct answer here is amazing. So if we're able to do something astonishing, we're able to do something that is not normal and usually amazing. People think it's brilliant. Number 4, estimate or estimate. When it's spelled like this, I never know whether it's using the noun or the verb form. But here we can say estimates. So here I know it's the noun. Estimates are sometimes or always accurate. So estimates are sometimes or always accurate. And the correct answer here is estimates are sometimes accurate. Remember, an estimate is a guess, an educated guess, but a guess. Flexible. So when you are not flexible, it is easy slash difficult to adapt to new things. So it is easy or is it difficult to adapt to new things? Okay, the correct answer here was number 2, difficult. So when you are not flexible, it is difficult to adapt to new things. So if you're not flexible, it means you're not able to change to suit the environment. Okay. Number 6, predictable. The weather 50 years from now is predictable or unpredictable. The weather 50 years from now is predictable or unpredictable. So 50 years in the future, what do we think? It's predictable or unpredictable? Well, the best answer here would be unpredictable because we don't really know what the weather is going to be like 50 years from now, which means it's hard to predict. It's hard to kind of expect what the weather will be like. So the correct answer here would be 2, unpredictable. To retain something is to keep it or to lose it. To retain something is to keep it or to lose it, which is the correct answer. Well, it is keep it. To retain something is to keep it or to remember it. Remember it. But if you do remember it, you kind of keep it in your mind, so it's kind of got the same meaning in this context. And finally, transform, or a word we should all know from the classic cartoon and movie Transformers. So transform, when you transform something, it stays the same or changes. And the correct answer here is when you transform something, it changes. Okay, so it changes. Okay, let's press ahead and look at some other words that we are going to be using in the next few exercises. Sorry, and these are from reading 2, and these are some of the these are 5 important words from reading 2. And let's work a bit on the pronunciation of these. So number 1, assimilate, assimilate. Number 2, emerging, emerging. Number 3, expertise, expertise. Number 4, persistence. Persistence. And number 5, transform. Transform. Okay, good. So like our reading 1 vocabulary, make sure that you pause the video and replay the pronunciation until you are able to say the words correctly. Pay particular attention to this word expertise. It is not expertise, it's expertise. Okay, so here we have another gap fill. So we've been given 4 of these words. 4 of these words. Been given emerging, transforming, persistence, and expertise. Okay? And it's asking us to complete the paragraph using the words from the box. Complete the paragraph using the words from the box. So before we begin this exercise, we need to think, does it want us to change the form of the words? Well, when it says complete the paragraph using the words from the box, it doesn't mention anything about us changing the form of the words. In fact, it wants us to use the actual words from the box. So here we're not going to change anything. We're going to be just choosing which of these words from the box to put into each area. So whether it goes in 1, 2, 3, or 4. So anytime you have an exercise like this, it's very helpful to write down whether the word is a noun, a verb, an adjective, or an adverb. And the reason that's important is because when you're doing this exercise, if you know, for example, that only let's say a verb maybe goes here, and you only have only one verb up here, then you know it's going to be that one verb. So even if you don't know the meaning of the word up here, it can be very useful to know the word form and to write in the correct word form, because that will help you decide which word goes in the correct place. So before you begin doing this, in your notes or even in your head, try and remember what each types of these words are, whether whether they are verbs, whether they are adjectives, or whether they are nouns, or whether they are adverbs. Have a quick think about that. Okay, now that you've thought about that, also think about the meaning of these words so you have a good idea of what they mean. You should already have a good idea of what they mean at this point. And then begin reading this paragraph, okay? My advice is always to begin right at the start. Don't just run to number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, because if you're reading it, you have a better idea of the context of what they're talking about. If you read it from the beginning, you have a better idea of the context. You also have a better idea of the grammar structure. So are they writing about the past, the present? And that can help when choosing the correct tense of a verb, let's say. Um, when you're coming up to these number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4, there's some strategies we use. So try and figure out whether it's a noun, a verb, or an adjective, or an adverb that goes into these spaces. You can do that by looking at the words around the spaces. There's sometimes little clues. And also pay attention to the content of the sentence, because that will give you context clues. So that will help you decide which word fits in that space by the meaning of the word. Okay, so these are two techniques you should know at this stage. Okay, now that you've done that and you've thought about it, pause the video and try and choose the correct words. Okay, hopefully you've done that. You've chosen which words to put in each gap, and you have decided what goes in number one, what goes in number two, three, and four from the words in the box up here. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. So, according to Malcolm Gladwell, a supporter of the role of nurture in creating genius, genius is a result of talent and hard work, but hard work plays a bigger role. He says it takes about 10 years or 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert. However, he acknowledges that a person's environment also plays a big role in transforming transforming a talent into expertise. So transforming a talent into expertise. For example, Bill Gates met the 10,000 hour rule when he got access to a high school computer in 1968 at the age of 13 and spent 10,000 hours programming on it. He was in the right environment just when his interest started emerging. After that, his persistence, his willingness to work harder and longer than other people led him to become the genius he is today. Okay, good. So, number one here plays a big role in transforming a talent into expertise. Okay, so the correct word here was transforming. This was a bit tricky because it was operating as part of a gerund in this sentence structure. A gerund in this sentence structure. Then we went into number two, and the correct answer here was expertise. So expertise. So changing talent into expertise. So remember, when you're transforming something, you're changing something into something else. So you'll be changing one noun into another noun. And so we know here it's a noun, and expertise is a noun, so that works very nicely for us. For example, Bill Gates met the 10,000 hour rule when he got access to a high school computer in 1968 at the age of 13 and spent 10,000 hours programming on it. He was in the right environment just when his interest started emerging. Emerging. So remember, when something's emerging, it's beginning to appear. So his interest started emerging. You may be wondering what word form this is. It's the adjective. Okay, so it's the adjective. So it's what is emerging? Well, his interest. So this is what's emerging. And then number four was after that his persistence. So that's his ability and desire to keep going. And also it says his willingness to work harder. So if you have that willingness to work harder, you are persistent. So the correct answer here would be his persistence. And again, it would have been helpful here if you recognize that persistence is a noun and that only a noun can go down here. Okay, excellent. All right, so let's move ahead now. We're going to be looking at these words and we're going to be choosing the correct option. So we're going to be looking at the 6 words and the sentences that come after them. And then we're going to choose the correct option in the sentences that follow the words. So, for example, we have number one, we have emerging, emerging. And when something is emerging, is it appearing or disappearing? So, number one, appearing, number two, disappearing. What you have to do is choose the correct word. So, you have to think about what emerging means and think when something is emerging, is it appearing or disappearing? We're going to do this one together. When we think about emerging, think about trying mentally imagine something emerging. When we have a picture of an egg and we see something breaking out of an egg, like a chicken or a baby turtle, it's appearing to us, and we can describe that as emerging. The turtle is emerging from the egg. So when something is emerging, it's appearing. Okay. So when something is emerging, um, is it appearing? Yes, it is. Okay. Um, we're going to be doing the same with each of these other um, sentences. Just going to be choosing the correct option. So pause the video and see if you can do that in a couple of minutes, and then restart the video when you're ready. Okay, so number two here we have disabled. So when you are disabled, it means you can't do anything, or it means you can't do some things. So which would be the correct option here? When you are disabled, it means you can't do anything or you can't do some things. Well, the correct answer here would be number two. Okay, when you are disabled, it means you can't do some things. So you've lost some ability in some way. So maybe that ability would be the ability to walk. That means you can't walk. Or maybe it's the ability to see. That would mean you're blind. If you're blind or you can't walk, it would be you're disabled. But that doesn't mean you can't do anything. Um, if you're disabled and you can go to class, let's say if you can't walk, you can still go to class. You can still talk to your classmates. You can still take part in class. You can still get 100% in all of the tests. The only thing you've lost is the ability to walk. Okay, so you can do lots of things, but you won't be able to do that one thing. Okay, so when you are disabled, it means you can't do some things. Some things. So, for example, if you're in a wheelchair, the some things you might not be able to do would be, as I was saying, walk or ride a bike, or even in most cases climb a mountain. Okay, so these are things that you might struggle to do, but there's lots of other things you can do. So the correct answer here was two, some things. Number three, assimilate. When you have assimilated something, you one completely understand it and can use it, or two, you understand enough to start using it. Okay, the correct answer here was completely understand it and can use it. When we assimilate something, it's a way of saying that we completely understand it. Okay, so if you're only beginning to kind of understand it, or you understand a little bit and start using it, that isn't this that we wouldn't describe that as assimilating something. To assimilate something is to completely understand it and use it in the appropriate way. Um, expertise. To acquire expertise takes some or a lot of practice. And the correct answer here would be a lot of practice. So it takes a lot of practice. And the idea here is to be an expert, and all experts have expertise. You need to practice a lot. You need to spend a lot of time developing that expertise. In fact, Malcolm Gladwell said it was something like 10,000 hours, or 10 years, I think it was, he said, to develop expertise. Persistence means you keep going and don't give up, or you easily give up trying. So you keep going and don't give up, or you easily give up trying. And persistence means you keep going and don't give up. So if you have the personality where something is hard and you still keep going, um, then you're showing persistence. So if you're a runner, you're going out and you're going for a jog, or you're doing a jog on a treadmill, and your body starts to get tired, and you still keep going and pushing yourself, then you're showing persistence. And it's not just for running; it's for lots of other things too. It's for anything that's kind of a challenge. If you keep going and keep pushing yourself, then you're showing persistence. Number 6, transform. To transform implies change or no change. I think we had this one already, and to transform implies change. So transform is when one thing changes to something else. Okay, so we're just going to work on these last ones. So this is some of the listening 1 vocabulary. And when we get through the next exercise, we're going to call it a wraps. So we're going to be working through these 10 words and practicing how to use them before we finish up. So we're going to be first working on the pronunciation of these words. So let's start with number 1, confidence. Confidence. Number 2, fascinated. Fascinated. Number 3, involuntary. Involuntary. Number 4, objective. Objective. Number 5, renowned. Renowned. Number 6, revise. Revise. Number 7, unconscious. Unconscious. Number 8, unfamiliar. Unfamiliar. Number 9, at the speed of light. At the speed of light. And number 10, before one's very eyes. Before one's very eyes. Okay, good. So pay particular attention to number 5. Notice that it is renowned and not renowned. Okay, it's renowned. Also, number 10, this one can be changed to pronoun form. So you can say before my very eyes. Make sure you use possessive pronoun. So before my very eyes, or before your very eyes, or before his very eyes. It doesn't need to be before one's very eyes. Okay, now that we've practiced the pronunciation of these words, let's look at how we might use them in context by going over some of the exercises that are important for us. So again, we're going to be completing some of the gaps using the correct form of the vocabulary word, and we're going to think of what part of speech is being used. So if we have a form of a word up here, we're going to have to think of whether we're going to need a noun, a verb, an adjective, or an adverb form of that word. So looking at that in context, here we have the word confident. Confident is being introduced to us as an adjective. You should know there is no verb of confident. I'm going to give you that one for free. And you're going to have to think, well, okay, there's no verb, but is there a noun? And is there a noun? If there is a noun form of confident, what is it? You might also want to think, is there an adverb? Is there an adverb? When you've done that, you're going to read this paragraph. You're going to be coming to these gaps. You're going to be thinking, well, what goes best here? An adjective, a noun, an adverb. Remember, it won't be a verb because there's no verb form of confident. And when you've done that, when you've decided what goes best in the gap, the adjective, verb, adjective, noun, or adverb, then write in the correct form of confident. So pause the video and do that now. Okay, let's go on. So the case of Polgar girls is very interesting. Their father, Laszlo Polgar, believed that exceptional mental abilities is less a result of innate talent than of proper training. He was confident, that's the adjective, confident that he could transform any child into a child prodigy. So, he was confident that he could transform any child into a child prodigy. Notice here that we're using the adjective following the simple subject, be verb, adjective construction. So he raised his daughters in an environment of constant chess practice. He was rewarded for his confidence because all three girls became child prodigies and chess grandmasters. Okay, so the correct word we're looking for here is confidence. That's the noun form of confident. How do we know it was a noun here? Well, there was a kind of a clue because we had the possessive pronoun here, and then we had there was no noun here, so the noun had to be here. If you have a possessive pronoun, it's going to own another noun. So we're going to need a noun here. If you see a space where it's followed by a noun, sometimes this might be an adjective, but we didn't have that here. Okay, we didn't have that here. So we know this has to be a noun. So he was rewarded for his confidence. Okay, right, let's try another word. Oh, actually, let's do something different entirely. Okay, so here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be replacing the underlined words in the paragraph with the correct synonyms or phrases. So what we're going to be doing, first of all, is we're going to be looking at these words in the box, or synonyms and phrases in the box. And we have before their very eyes, renowned, make a few revisions, fascinating, at the speed of light, and unfamiliar. Okay. Now, these are all synonyms and phrases for the words down here, which are underlined. So here we've got, for example, Dee Westry is a very famous and admired speed painter. And there is a word up here, or a phrase, which can replace these underlined words. Very famous and admired. So before we move ahead, let's just think about what the first one might be. D. Westry is a very famous and admired. So look at these words. Before their very eyes, renowned, make a few revisions. And which one of these in this box means the same as very famous and admired? Pause the video and see if you can find the correct word. Good. Hopefully you noticed that the correct word here is renowned. So instead of writing D. Westry is a very famous and admired speed painter and performer, you could write D. Westry is a renowned speed painter and performer. That's because renowned and very famous and admired mean the same thing. Mean the same thing. So now that we've done that one and we've used the word renowned, you can cross that word out in your notes, and you are going to be replacing the rest of the underlined words in the paragraph with the correct synonyms and phrases from this box. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to do. So you've got 5 more to do. Okay, so pause the video and see if you can do that now. Okay, so let's go to the start of this paragraph. So D. Westry is a renowned speed painter and performer. He was a child prodigy and has been painting since the 1970s. He paints with both hands at the same time and produces amazing artworks at the speed of light. How do we know at the speed of light goes here? Well, because the underlined words here are extremely quickly. And a synonym for extremely quickly is the phrase at the speed of light. So we can replace extremely quickly with at the speed of light. He once did a painting in 10 seconds. What is most fascinating is that his paintings are done upside down. So here at number 3, it says interesting. And what's the synonym for interesting? Well, the word fascinating. In fact, fascinating means very interesting. So what is the most fascinating is that his paintings are done upside down. For much of the performance, what he paints looks completely unknown and unrecognizable. We're going to replace unknown and unrecognizable with a word up here, which is unfamiliar. Remember, unfamiliar means the same as unknown and unrecognizable. So what he paints and looks completely unfamiliar. Then, during the last few moments, he makes a few revisions. Why do we go with makes a few revisions? Because here it says he reviews and corrects a few strokes. If you review and correct a few strokes, it's the same as make a few revisions. So the correct answer here would be then, during the last few moments, he makes a few revisions. Next comes the big reveal. He turns the canvas around for the audience to see. And there, before their very eyes, it transforms into a stunning work of art. So why did we choose before their very eyes? Well, why it says here while the audience is watching. So remember, if something happens before one's very eyes, it means it happens while somebody is watching, while that one is watching. Well, here it says the audience is watching, so it's before their very eyes. Okay, their very eyes, all of their eyes. So before their very eyes, it transforms into a stunning work of art. Okay, we've used a lot of the words from this unit in context. We've introduced some of the ways you will be using these words in the lab test and in future exercises. In particular, about the importance of thinking about the parts of speech and the word form to be used in gap fills. So there's a lot to take in here, but the important takeaway is that at this level of the PYD on book 6, it's not enough just to know this word's a noun, this word's an adjective, and this word is a verb. You need to know that some of the words that have the same base form will have a noun form, a verb form, and an adjective form. So that's very important because even though on your vocabulary sheet we won't be giving you all of the different word forms, you're still going to have to take time to learn what they are. And don't worry, they will be covered in your class, and you will be doing lots of exercises like what we've done in this video. So there will be plenty of opportunity to learn about the different ways words can be used. You're going to have to be really accurate with how you use your words at this stage in the PYD. You're going to have to think about, well, if a verb fits here, what is the tense of the verb? Does it need an S on the end? Does it need an ing? You're going to have to be really accurate with your nouns. Is it a singular noun or is it a plural noun? And remember, the best way to figure that out is looking at the words around certain gaps. And they will help you decide the correct form of the word you want to use. But probably the most important thing is that you understand the meaning of all of the words. There's a lot of difficult vocabulary at this level. You're going to have to give yourself extra time to study. Make sure that you do that, and you're guaranteed to get good marks pressing ahead. Okay, thank you for listening to this video.